So some of the context I want to share today is actually third party coming from my mother's side because I don't have no recollection of none of that stuff. So I was born in Vietnam in 1976 in a town called Haiphong. It's north of Vietnam. It's a port city, pretty wealthy in like fishing, like trades. So my family are ethnically Chinese. We migrated from China to Vietnam way before my birth. But after when the Vietnam War kicked in, we all had to flee because the new Vietnamese government's like anybody that's not that's part of the U.S. support or that's not ethnically Vietnamese, like get out. And so my family and we all fled by boat. So we were stranded in South China Sea for 6 months, no food or water. I remember my mom telling me that there was a lot of sharks around because sometimes people that passed away during the trip had to be tossed over because of health concerns. My mom also shared with me that on that journey escaping Vietnam, she lost her parents and some close family friends and because they actually got murdered by Cambodian pirates. Not only was it bad enough that they got robbed, but they also lost their life. About the 6 months into the being stranded in the sea, we was rescued by some fishermen, and in order to be rescued, we had to give up everything we had, all our gold, any value of starting a new life in a new place was stripped from us. But the good thing is that we had our life, and so we was towed to Hong Kong refugee camps where we stayed for 2 years before we got visas to come to the U.S.
That is, whew, take a moment, exhale. Yeah, and in that process of spending time in I know you don't remember much, but just to give continuality, as you're seeking asylum and you come to San Francisco, how was that transition? Do you remember that transition or?
I don't. All I remember is like me being on the airplane, sitting next to my mom. I also remember the luggage tag that was on our luggage. It said Pan Am, Air. So we came through the plane. One thing, as I got older and I reflect back on what it meant to be in Hong Kong refugee camp, it was more like a Hong Kong detention center, fenced off, barbed wires, guards. So like people, it was like thousands of people on a tiny little part of Hong Kong Island, just stuck there. So I showed Phil the pictures a while back, and he was like, "Wow!" Like I was amazed when I first saw it. Like, "Wow, this is inhumane." So we landed in San Francisco in 1980. From there, we moved around a lot around the Bay Area. My mom and dad was looking for work. Couldn't really speak the language, English that is, and just worked any job they could find. So that's what caused us to move around a lot. We finally settled back in San Francisco. My mom went back to school, tried to get her high school diploma. I don't know how that went. She never talks about it. But then I remember she actually attended beauty college and got a degree in her cosmetology license. So she started doing that. But then about I think like 2 years into settling into the U.S., my mom and dad separated. I just remember there was a lot of arguing all the time. One time my dad had to be arrested by San Francisco Police Department. They came, arrested him, took him away. Later I found out there was a lot of domestic violence going on in my house. It was me and my little brother at the time. I'm the oldest of 6. So after that, my dad got out of jail. He told my mom she had an ultimatum. Either, which son do you want? You got to pick. And so I remember we was at the San Francisco Greyhound bus station. I was holding on to my brother's hand. My dad just grabbed me and my brother to start taking us on the bus. My mom grabbed my hand. I remember she, held on to me and pulled me back. I fell in her arms. And I just saw as I watched my little brother board the bus with my dad. And when he sat down, my brother just waving because he didn't know nothing. I was 6, I think 6 at the time, and he was like 4. I just remember walking home, just crying a lot, just like feeling that loss.
That is, woo, my heart. So how did that impact you? I know you started crying and stuff, but like that was your little brother, learning new things about your dad. How does that impact you?
So like I didn't understand what meant. I'm just like, why is these people taking my dad? And I was like looking at my mom, and she's crying, and at the time I couldn't understand English, so it's like it was just gibberish to me. But it was just like I felt like part of me was being taken away, especially my little brother, who I loved and cared about. And so having them taken from my life was, how you say, life shattering. Because after that, my mom was barely ever home. She was gone all the time. So I basically and we was living in the San Francisco Tenderloin at the time. So I basically just stayed in an apartment or just stayed in an apartment. That's basically all I did.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever see your brother again later on, or
later on in life? I was able to go visit him, see him, because he never came. My dad never brought him down to me, but my dad's sister came and picked me up and brought me to go visit him.
So growing up in San Francisco, what are some of the things that you experienced in the Tenderloin or witnessed in the Tenderloin?
Well, even before that, before going to San Francisco, I remember I was in like a nursery school, and that's my first encounter with racism. I remember, I think they was Catholic because I remember the white and the black outfit they was wearing. So it's like a Catholic nursery school. I remember I was playing with this one doll, and the nuns like give it to this little white girl, and then I'm like, I understand she just said give it, right? And so I'm like shaking my head like, no, I'm not giving this up. And so she pulled it from my hand, and I remember her yelling at me to let go, and then I held on so tight that one of the legs came off, and then I got hit for that, with a ruler, and then I remember never going back.
And then that's when you started staying more in the apartment and staying more at home.
Well, also like I didn't know the area.
Gotcha.
Like it was like unfamiliar to me. My mom also said like it's dangerous outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then as you started to grow up, did you stay in the Tenderloin or? We
stayed there for a while, and then I don't know how long we was there, but I just remember one day my mom was like, "We got to get out of here." We found another spot in San Francisco called Parole Hill, and so we moved to Parole Hill, but it was no better. Actually, it was worse because when we got there, all I see was a sea of black faces, like all looking at us, mumbling, like whispering, like who is these people, like what they do in our neighborhood. I didn't have to understand English to know that we wasn't welcome in this place. And one of the ways that I found out that we wasn't welcome is they kept breaking into my mom's car, and it wasn't nothing lavish. It was just like a beater, but they just destroyed the car, like flattened the tire, broke the window, and that's our only way to get around. And so because we didn't know public transportation, but my mom ended up having to get rid of the car because she couldn't pay for all the costs. So we did public transportation all the time, and we just moved around. I remember for when we first got there, for like a whole year, I got picked on. I got rocks thrown at me. I got rotten eggs thrown at me. Got pushed down. Different names called. And also, like, one of the things that was really traumatic was getting chased by dogs. So I make this joke that, I appreciate getting chased by dogs because it actually helped me run good in track and field. So I became really good at that, climbing and running and jumping. So, like, it's sad to say, but I learned it was a skill that I had to develop, right? I remember also that we ended up putting bars all on our doors, our window, and later on I thought about it was like a prison. Like we was confined to our apartment.
Mm. And then is that kind of like the area where you got bullied a lot?
Mm-hmm. It was in Parole Hill. So I took my family back over there, like my brother and my fiance and my stepdaughter and my niece and nephew, and show them where we grew up, where me and my brother grew up as kids, right? And they was all shocked. They're like, "Wow, you actually live here?" And it's just as bad as when we left, if not worse. And so I showed them, like, from the car, I showed them, like, that's the place that we live in, that apartment right there. And they're like, wow. And from our apartment to the elementary school that I went to, that I attended, was maybe a 5-minute walk, just up the hill. But it took me about 15 to 30 minutes to get to school every day, just so I could avoid my being bullied and attacked. And so I always take the long route just to get to school. I remember this one time where they finally caught me. They're like, hey, like, they surrounded me, and I'm like, they say, so at this time I learned a little bit English because they forced me to take ESL. And so I understood they say you have two choices. Either you fight one of us or you fight all of us. And it was just like 5 of them. And so, like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist for a kid. Like, okay, I'll take my chance with just one. The kid was taller than me. I don't even remember how it started. I just remember standing over the kid with my fist balled up. My knuckle was bleeding. And it wasn't because the blood off his face. It was because I hit the wall. We was fighting right next to our apartment, I guess where they lived. And I remember, like, them coming up to me. I'm like, they about to jump me because I beat up one of their own. And they actually, like, congratulated me, pat me on my back, rub my head, and, like, welcome to the neighborhood.
So it was like an initiation?
It was like an initiation. I had to prove myself, and then I realized that's my start of normalizing violence. Like, everywhere I saw was violence. Like, you use violence to solve everything, to get your way, whether it's physical, verbal, even sexual. And later on, I learned it was financial. Like, if you don't have the money, you have the money, you get whatever you want.
I think, do you feel like that, well, a clarifying question, do you feel like that that acceptance into the neighborhood is something that you were looking for or a replace of something?
I never really thought of it like that. I thought more of like survival. Like, I had to, if I, that was the way to be part of the community, is to be like the community, right? And so if you're not like the community, then, like, when I first moved in, you'd be a target, you'd be a victim of the community.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So growing up, now you're in the community. I'm assuming that folks know you,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or know of you, know your name,
Yeah.
like know that don't mess with him,
Yeah.
things like that. And so tell us a little bit about like school and the athletics, your athletics and how you thrived in school.
So,
which is very different than what you
Yeah.
experienced in the community.
yeah, so I remember, like, sports was like the thing for all boys. Right? So that's your way of being accepted in the neighborhood. You had to excel in sports. I remember as second grade, we was playing kickball and got in a verbal conflict with another kid, a Samoan kid. He ended up stabbing me with a pencil. And I got in trouble because I couldn't speak English that well, so I was blamed for being the instigator of the situation. And I still had the pencil mark from today on my arm. So, like every time I look at my forearm, I'm like, oh yeah, I still remember that kid. And we became best friends after that. It was weird. But actually in second grade, I actually flunked second grade because I ended up staying home raising my little brother for a whole year by myself. Because I remember my brother coming home, his eye was always red, diaper rashes, and he just he just didn't look well. And so one day, I remember my mom dropped him off, and then she left, and I decided, I'm gonna cut school today. And so I went next door, I looked in the window, I see my little baby brother just sitting in the middle of the floor while the two elder Asian couple was just sitting there watching TV. And so I knocked on the door, I give my brother back, and then for the whole year, I just stayed home and raised my little brother by myself. So every time my mom brought him over, I just pick him back up. And they live right next door, so I just walked back into our apartment, and I learned to be a parent at, I think, 8 years old. And so, it was challenging. But then when I went to school, I was, one of those kids that always got picked last because I wasn't good at it. I remember like we did kickball was one of the things, when I was growing up. And so I remember we all lined up, and then even dodgeball, kickball and dodgeball was the two main thing in our school. And I was always the last kid to get picked. And then I taught myself, like, if you want to be, not the last, you got to be better. And so basically when I went home, I dreamt about how to be better. And I didn't get to practice physically, but mentally I practiced every day how to be better. And I got better. And I wasn't the last kid to get picked. And it felt great not being the last kid to be picked. And so I like distanced myself like emotionally how it felt to be last again. Cause like I never want to feel that being last ever again.
Mm-hmm. And then, so second grade, you stayed back for your little brother. And then was that third, fourth, fifth grade?
So my mom found out at the end of second grade that I was cutting school for the whole year.
Got it.
And then she ended up taking my brother to somewhere across the city where I didn't have access to picking up my brother.
Okay.
Right? But this time when he did come home, he wasn't as bad as before. He didn't look, he didn't have the red eyes, didn't have diaper rashes. So like, part of me is like, I felt better. It's like, okay, this is good. Because if it did, I would have found out where he was and I would have picked him up myself. All right. But that was, it was part of me felt okay after the time, knowing that my brother was safe.
Mm-hmm. And so that was after
like nine. That's like when I was 9 years old.
9 years old, so third, fourth, ish grade.
Yeah.
And then, so you go through all of that. You go through ESL, and then let's talk about like middle school or junior high school. How was that for you?
So I remember in San Francisco, the system works from like first to fourth or first to fifth, and then from 6 to 8 you're in middle school. So in sixth grade, I got transferred to a school in a different community neighborhood where like kids like, what you doing over here? Like you don't belong over here. So these are all African American kids, and like myself, I'm just like one of thousands of refugees that came to the U.S. Like my story is not very unique in that sense, right? But I realized like going to that different school was not safe. So all that bullying that I felt when I first moved into Patrol Hill happened all over again. And so I ended up cutting second grade for the whole year because I went to school, I got attacked, and I'm like, I'm not gonna do it. All right. So my grade, I had a GPA like less than a 1, right? Like maybe a 0.57, just because I didn't go to school. And for good reason. I didn't want to get picked on, I didn't want to get violated. And so I went to school for summer school. And during summer school, my seventh grade, I transferred to a school closer to me called Patrol Hill Middle School. I excel. I got better, right? Because the kids in that school all went from my neighborhood, and I knew most of them. And so I went from less than a 1.0 to honor roll. And I ran track and field, played baseball. We won the city championship in track and field. So towards the end of that year, school year, I got accepted to one of the most elite high schools in the country, which is Lowell High School. And I didn't know what that meant, right? The school sent me a letter. It's like, hey, I'm like, Mom, look, I got acceptance letter for this high school. And my mom like, nah, you're not going. I'm like, why? She's like, that's too far. I'm not driving you. You're not taking the bus. So I never went to high school. So 8th grade came around. I quit caring, quit playing sports, start cutting school at 8th grade. I mean, in the 8th grade, yeah. So I just quit. It's like, like, why should I care, right? You don't care. I don't. Why should I care? But then I start going down this downhill spiral, like some of the other refugee kids like myself. We just struggle to the point where like, if I'm not getting no validation, I'm not getting no love. Like, why should I care? I started having a lot of blaming issues. I started blaming my mom for everything. I didn't even think about my dad at this time because he was out of the picture. So like, outside, out of mind. I didn't even think about him. But I focused on my mom, all my resentment, all my disappointment, my anger, like all went toward her because like you supposed to be my mom. And because I see other moms there for their kids, sporting events, other events. I'm like, where you at? She like, I don't got no time, you know? And then I found like, she'd be gone for like days. And so I basically like had to start shoplifting as a kid, just so I don't get picked on for having like, holes in my shoes. I remember one time I went to school with duct tape because my shoe fell apart and like became ridiculed for having duct tape. Even for having like shoes, like Pro Wings was a thing back in the days. And kids like, oh, look, you got those imitation Jordan. Like, look what you're wearing. I just got teased, and I'm just like, man, I'm tired of being like this. So I started shoplifting and got arrested, but got released. Never went to jail, never went to juvie, nothing. They just let me go to my mom. And so like that started that pathway down to self-destruction.
So like just not having the things you felt like you needed, well, I say felt, and I use that in quotes. I hear a light like neglect. Would that be?
Yeah.
Because you said your mom was gone for days, and
I felt abandoned actually.
Okay.
And then I started that cycle of abandonment. So like because she abandoned me, I started abandoning my brother, and then I started abandoning myself. In the point where like every time she was home, I isolate myself in the room. Like it was just me and my own little world. So I started building up this wall, this castle around my emotions, my thoughts, just myself, just like never sharing who I am, how I feel with anybody.
So with that, so this all happened in middle school, correct? I just want to make sure.
It started.
It started like started in middle school.
Actually, it started before that.
A little bit before
that. It started in elementary and just worked its way up to, because in the fifth grade, I actually got kicked out of my school because they're like, you're too self-destructive, right? So they sent me to a school across the city where I had to ride a little yellow school bus. And I remember every time I got off the little yellow school bus, they would ridicule me, like all the other kids, like, oh, you retarded, you're handicapped. Like I rode with a lot of kids that are special need, and I was enrolled in a special need class. And I felt humiliated. I can't even say the word.
I can't say humiliated.
Humiliated, right? Like there was this one girl I liked, and she was like, looked down at me because like, you're special ed. Like, why should I like you? And so it's just like, that more resentment just kept I kept developing towards my mom. Like, you put me here.
And so was that due to behavior, or I know sometimes they do it for behavior or just ESL in general?
I think it was a combination of both. It was ESL and behavior because I got in some school fights. I just wasn't caring in class. I wasn't paying attention. I was being disruptive. I think for me, as I reflect, it was like a cry for help, right? Like I needed help, but nobody was giving it to me. So this is the one way I'm gonna find help is to act out.
Yeah, yeah. And so with I call it trickling, like little stuff over time. Now, did you go to high school in San Francisco, or did you? Oh, okay.
I started because I got denied to go to Lowell High School by my mom. I went to Mission High, which is close to my school, close to our house actually. So I take the bus, go to school. My mom was still absent at this time, like here and there. So I got into football, started playing sports again. Did pretty well. I played as a freshman. I played varsity, JV, and varsity at the same time. Well, for many reasons, because our school didn't have enough players. So, but the other thing is like I kind of became really kind of good at it. I forced myself to become good at it. Hit the gym. I had like these massive legs, but no upper body. I was like a speed skater, basically. I had giant thighs, but no upper body. Really fast because all I did was legs every day. But they're like, wow, you should play football and do other things. So became really good at that. But then during the school year, my freshman year, my mom said, we're moving. I'm like, moving where? She said, we're going to move to Richmond, California. I'm like, what the hell are we going to Richmond for? Right? So I have like play cousins that live over there. And so
so what do you mean by, some people don't understand play cousins. I know what play cousins mean, but just for people who don't understand play cousins, just
so play cousins like like people that we're close to, but we're not really family members.
You grew up together.
We grew up together. Right?
Like family.
Yeah, we grew up like together like family. So I came to know him because we went to elementary school together, but we didn't go to junior high together. But we went, and so we reconnected back. So they moved to Richmond way before we did. And then my mom at this time, she had a boyfriend, a Vietnamese guy. And so we also had two siblings. Like I had my 2 stepsisters. So same mom, different dad. So, and then she's like, oh, we're going to move over there because he wanted to move over there because he was related to them. And so we ended up to move to Richmond, and that was my first interaction or first, remembrance of meeting other Asians. That wasn't like my own, right? So like, I was like, you look like me, but we don't talk the same language. So I come to learn about the Minh culture, the Lao culture, the Cambodian culture. Like, I'm like, wow, like this is different. But then as we talk about, as I went to their house, ate their food, watched their interaction with their family, it's like, damn, we grew up almost the same way, right? And it's crazy. And then I'm like, and then I didn't even know about gangs at the time. In San Francisco, we just like, we had our neighborhoods. That was it. Your neighborhood didn't like my neighborhood. Like, we don't care what color you are, but we didn't like each other. But now when we moved to Richmond, I'm like, why they all wear red? Why they all wear blue? And why they say cuz? Why they say blood? Like, I didn't understand that because growing up, San Francisco, we used to wear blood, like family. Like, what's up, blood? And then I remember when I went to Richmond and I was like around all these like Asian and Pacific Islanders. I'm like, what's up, blood? And they like, this cuz. I'm like, what the hell is that? Like cousins? Like, we're cousins? Like, I'm like, cool, all right, cousins. And they're like, no, this is Crip. I'm like, I looked at my cousin like, and I'm like, what does that mean, right? And so like, it was like a culture shock for me, like learning like, damn, there's hella Asian, but they gangbang. Like, what does that even mean? And they say, oh yeah, this is Crip over here, that's blood over there. And I'm like, that's Sereno, that's Norteño. Like, okay, like, so it's not safe to go over there? They said, now you hang out with us. And so I'm like, oh shoot, like I had to pick a side. And it's like, for me, it wasn't hard to pick a side. Like, you look like me, we're very similar in our struggles. I'm just gonna kick it with you guys. But I didn't realize kicking with them was gonna make me a target of people that they had issues with. And so like, now I'm getting in fights with other gang members because I was hanging out with these guys.
So do you think, so typical gang initiation is like this big old, like one person and you get a bunch of hits, like a gang. Was that for you or was it totally different?
I wasn't in the gang.
You just was associated.
I was guilty by association because I was just hanging out with them, and people didn't ask like, they didn't ask me like, you part of the gang. They just see me like, oh, you was hanging. I remember you hanging out with those guys, so we just going to try to fight you or jump you. And so I'm like, oh shoot, like I never got jumped in that gang, but just by association, I was linked to them.
Mm-hmm. And then how does that affect your upbringing from that on?
So Richmond High was a real, I call it a ghetto school. We didn't have no kind of resources. Couldn't even look out the window. All the windows was painted. So like, and then there was always shooting or fights in the school. We had security on campus. Like, you didn't have metal detectors. Like, you had to get metal detected going in and out of school. There was no off-campus lunch. Like, it was too dangerous because if you went off campus, you might get shot, all right, just for wearing the wrong color. And I didn't realize that I started dressing like the guys I was hanging out with. Didn't dawn on me like, oh, I look like them. I was like buying so they was all Crips, and I was wearing all this blue all the time. I didn't wear the rag, the bandana, nothing, but I just started wearing a lot of blue clothes. And then like, I'm like, oh shoot. And then somebody's like, so when I remember I went to San Francisco to a family event, and my cousin was there. He just got out of youth authority. And he's like, you gangbang man? Like, no. He said, why you got all that blue on? I just like blue. He's like, come on. He's like, I'm your cousin. I've been through the system. I know when somebody's, either you in or you just associated, right? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? I'm just hanging out with people. That was my excuse.
Look, I plead the fifth.
Yeah. And then my mom, she didn't pay much mind to me. At 15, I started drinking, Started smoking weed because that's what they did. So I just did it too, even though I didn't really like it, but I did it because just so I could fit in.
And do you think I'm hearing a little similarity? So like you fitting in, like when you were in Parole Hill, and here it was like you fell into it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So like you're trying to get away from it, and then it's kind of like, okay, I got to defend myself to be able to be accepted. And then even here, it's like, oh, you want to be with us? Like you're gonna have to do what we say in order to fit in. I use that loosely.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you had any voice and choice to not do any of those things, or just still the survival of like?
I think survival just kicked in. Because ever since I was a kid, I like either you adapt or you become a victim, and like I got tired of being a victim. Like I'm not gonna be a victim. And what the negative side of that, I became a bully. Right? I hated bullies growing up because I got bullied and I ended up becoming a bully, just so I don't be bullied. And I'm like, damn, that's so ironic. Like that's so jacked up. Like how that cycle just got played around, right? And it wasn't later on to life that I realized all this. Like I just messed up.
Now, in the time that you said around 15 years old?
That's when we moved to Richmond.
And then you got introduced, well, not introduced, it kind of started to
submerge into it.
Yeah. Where do you feel like you really stopped like caring? Like you just absolutely was just like
16 years old. My 16th birthday. I'm just like, I remember, so like we had like exchange school program where other kids from other school came to our school, and like I got to see their life, because when I went to their places, their house, their families, I'm like, damn, I ain't got mine is nothing like this. Like I wanted that. Like what you got? I want this, right? It's no matter how much I wanted, I just didn't have it. Came home, like my mom made me babysit when she went out. Her and my father-in-law, her boyfriend, when they go out, like I was stuck with the kids. Like at one time, I got stuck with my siblings and other people's kids. And I'm like, damn, I'm a kid. I ain't trying to take care of all these other kids, right? But I was forced to do that. And like more resentment came up. And at 16, like I don't care no more. I started going out of this mindset where like it's kind of like a suicide state where like who's gonna miss me when I'm gone? I started entertaining these thoughts like who cares? Who care about me, right? Sorry, I don't care about none of this stuff no more. Like I didn't have nothing, so I like wasn't attached to material stuff, even so because I didn't have nothing. But one thing I just started, it's that mindset. Like I stopped caring. Like I don't care about my siblings. Like they didn't mean nothing to me. I just went down this self-destruction pity party in my head. Like whatever. Right.
Do you feel like that started or was with your mom, like connected to your mom in some way, or is just kind of like how the environment just fed into that, if that makes sense?
I think it's a combination of that, both of that, and just even like just being poor. Like I got tired of being poor. I got tired of not having nothing. And part of that nothing is not just material stuff, but not having structure in my life, not having support in my life. I'm just like, I go to games, events. I see other parents, like like they're supporting their kids. I'm like, shit, like where's mine's at? Like where's my love? Where's my support? And then one thing in our household, we're very unemotional. We unaffectionate, right? We don't say thank you. We don't say I love you. We don't give hugs. Like we don't did none of that. All that bonding. Like I see other families like, I want that. Like I need that. And I remember other kids' parents like hugging me when I as different. That felt great. It's like, ooh, it's like something like it was a yearning that I wanted so bad, but I couldn't have, and it hurt. It hurt so much that I got angry. And in some of my, like I remember when I was playing football, I remember this one game where I got so mad, I just started crying in the middle of the field and just like hurting people. I was trying to hurt people, like the other team. Like I was trying to hurt them really bad, like hit them really hard with everything I had because I was just hurting so bad that I'm like, later on in life, I thought about I was like, man, if I hurt somebody, some of this would go away. And so that's why part of the drinking and the smoking and the weed use came into play. It's like I was trying to numb all that pain. But after the substance wore out, like it was still there. And it felt like it was a burning sensation inside of me that I just couldn't get rid of. And that's where the suicide thoughts started coming in.
And then from there, were there any, like, from your attempts, was there any change in your mom's behavior or?
None. I remember there was a Asian youth group that tried to like save a lot of the young Asian kids from the gang life and from prison and the criminal justice system. Like it felt good, but I still felt I didn't let myself belong in that. I didn't want to make myself vulnerable because part of me felt like if I did, it was just false hope, and I didn't want to hurt myself more. So like I continued to build that wall up of that castle, you could say, around my heart and who I am on a mental state. Because like just to be let down, like from my mom alone, and for somebody else to do that for me, it was shattering. It hurt so bad, like I can't go through that again. So I just didn't open up to nobody. No matter how much people try to reach out to me, there was as I reflect, there was a lot of good people that tried to save me, but I just didn't want to be saved.
And so in this mindset that you're in your heart, mind, and spirit, what led up to the crime that caused you to go to jail
So
or to
go to prison.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So hanging out with the gang members, I had to do criminal activity, steal stuff, hurt people. And I remember it was September 30th, 1993. One of my friends, gang member friends, he called me and said I was cutting school. I cut school the whole day, hanging out at one of my other homies' house, and my homeboy called me up and said, "Hey, there's some gang members by school. Let's roll." And I'm like, "Let's go," because I always had to feel like I had to prove myself. Like everywhere in my life, I had to prove myself in sports, in school, everywhere. So I'm like, "Let's go." Not afraid because at the time, not afraid if I got hurt. I didn't even care if I died. I'm just like, "Let's go," right? And I didn't even care about making a name for myself because I just like I wanted to be accepted. So like if I could do something where they felt like the people that I hung out with accepted me, I'm like, I was cool. But also at that point, I was like, I don't care. Right? Whatever happens, right? So we got in the car, went down there. It was a whole bunch of gang members. It was like five of us versus 20 of them. And we were like, what's up? Like, let's do this. And then before we actually got out of the car, we saw police lights. So somebody called the police. So we all went home. Went back to my homeboy's house. And then my mom was paging me. She was like, hey, 911, come home. Like, why? Like, that ain't my home. Like, why should I come home? Well, I need you to come take care of your brother and sister. I'm like, man, I don't care about that. Well, you ain't been home in a while. Like, I be gone. I end up developing my mom's behavior. Well, I started abandoning them for days too. So I'm like, man, I'm not trying to be a parent no more. Like, I'm done. And so I think my boy's like, hey, man, just go, man. Just go home. So three of us went in the car. On the way home, I saw some people that looked like rival gang members. I'm like, hey, let's go get those dudes. Let's go show them what we're about. And so I ended up, we parked. I told the driver, make two, like, let's go pull over there. Let's try to get them because they're going around this corner. We're going to get them. And so we parked over there around the corner, jumped out the car, looked for them. And one of my homeboys ended up like, there they are. So I grabbed my knife because at the time, like, I'm going to have some kind of weapon because gangs don't fight fair. Part of me didn't even think, like, if he got a gun, like, so what? Like, I didn't care, right? I had something. If he used it on me or I use it on him, it doesn't matter. And so, like, adrenaline's pumping. Part of me was also scared, but I'm like, can't be a punk. I kept pumping myself up, like, come on, you got to do this. Grabbed my knife, chased him for 2 blocks, threw him against a wall, stabbed him multiple times, and ran off. Didn't know if he died, if he lived. I just like, okay. And then threw the knife in the bushes, jumped in the car, and we took off. Went back to my homeboy's house. And part of me, something like ominous, like bad, just like almost like this feeling I had. So, like it was like a rush of guilt that just like, and shame just hit me. And then when we got to my homeboy's house, the other two guys came in with me. And then my homeboy that was at the house, he's like, "What's going on?" None of us said nothing. It was just dead silence. It was so quiet. And I said, I think I stabbed somebody. I think I might have killed them. And then my homeboy at the house, he looked at me. It's like, "You did what? What?" And the other two guys in the car that with me, that standing behind me, they didn't say nothing. Then my mom paged me again. Like, it just broke the silence. And I was like, "Hey, man, take me home." Went home, went straight into my room, closed the door, locked it, sat on my bed, and just like went through the story. Like, did that really happen? Like, this denial, like imagine like what, like replaying what happened. Like, did that really happen? Did I do something? Did I actually do something? Next day, went to school, trying to get some normalcy back in my life, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't stay in school. Called my homeboy up, said, "Hey, man, I'm coming over." Came over there, and then the guy that was in the car with me, he came back to the house. He's like, and because when we went back, just backtrack real quick. When I decided to go back home, we drove past the scene of the crime. There was a lot of police there. There was ambulance. Everybody was there. I'm just like, and I lay low, like they gonna see me, they gonna arrest me, and just drove off. But the next day, that evening, I guess during the day, but the police raided my house, looking for me. I wasn't there. My mom paged me again. She's like, "What's going on?" Like 911, multiple, like just blowing up my pager. And she's like, "Why the police here? Why they searching your room? Why they say you killed somebody?" I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. I ain't do nothing." She said, get your butt home." So I came home. My room was tore up. They flipped everything over. Mom said they took a whole bunch of stuff. I'm like, I didn't care. Like whatever, they just took it. She said, "Well, you need to go to the police station and clarify this." So my mom's boyfriend and I went to the police station. It was called San Pablo Police Department. Went down there. They made him sit outside. They put me in the room, interrogated me, good cop, bad cop. They said, "Well, your homeboy's next door," and he told us everything. He said everything. He told me, they told us everything that you did, what happened that whole night. And I tried to deny it. They end up finally, I end up confessing, and they arrested me. At this whole time, no, I said, "Can I talk to my mom's boyfriend, my stepdad?" They're like, "No, he went home already." But in reality, he was still there. And so they booked me, took me to juvenile hall. That was my first time being booked, arrested, and just that experience I was numb at the time. Like my mind, my body, like there's like no sensation. Like I just felt nothing, like straight denial. Went through the whole process, getting strip search, medical search, and then put in a room, observation room, for a day before the next day, where I was put into general population.
Do you think part of this is just part of that was like having some type of displaced anger and like rage, like built up rage? Mm-hmm. Like I remember you talking about like on the football field, and different events growing mm-hmm. up, and that this is like it felt like a pent up rage, and it was like an exit.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way, or just kind of?
So when I went to when I was going through trial, mm-hmm. they said the coroner and the autopsy say like the wounds on the person I harmed was very brutal. There was a lot of anger involved in here, a lot of pain. Like a lot of force was put into this young person's life that like And then I realized that I took all those years of resentment, anger, and just hate. I just unleashed it on this poor person who was later I found was only 15 years old. I was 16, right? Well, actually, I turned 17. 6 days after my 17th birthday, I committed this crime. And, like, I released all that onto him. He didn't deserve it. And so, like, I gave it all. I gave him everything that I had.
Mm-hmm. And then, so let's go back a little bit. So when you confessed, you went through the whole process. How was your initial reaction on like being convicted, in the court?
Denial. I was in denial. Like, my attorney said, "Oh, you do 10. You do 10 years and you be out." They sentenced me to 25 years to life with 2-year gang enhancement. My attorney said, "You do 10, you'll be out." I went back to the holding tank where my co-defendant was. He was 18 at the time, and he was crying. I'm like, "What you crying for, man? We're getting out in 10 years." Like, through the whole process, I was like numb to the whole process. I was like a little kid in the courthouse. Like, I went like reversed back to a little kid in the courthouse, smiling. That's what I found out later. I didn't know. I realized I was doing all this, like, just acting very immature. He's like, "What you happy about?" I'm like, "We're getting out in 10 years." He said, "No, we're not. We just got a life sentence." I'm like, I didn't know what that meant. Like, he said, "Well, like, we're still getting out." That's what the attorney told me. He said, "We're not getting out." It didn't register for me. I wasn't like, no, I wasn't hearing I wasn't accepting what he was telling me. I'm like, "No, we're getting out in 10 years. That's what my attorney told me." And so, but I didn't understand the severity of what was happening, right? And then I just went back like it was like, and then I went back to my pod. We was in different pods. And then the guys up there like, "What happened?" They said, "Oh, they gave me a life sentence, but I'll be out in 10 years." They looked at me like, "What's wrong with you, man?" Like, But there's another story about when I first went to county jail. I was attacked. Like, this big white dude tried to rape me, and I ended up trying to kill him. I put my hand in his mouth, trying to rip his jaw open, because I'm like, you're not gonna do nothing to me. I'm gonna hurt you before you hurt me. Even though he's bigger than me, but every strength I had, I was trying to rip his whole head off. I'm like, you're not gonna do nothing to me, and I got respect from that. Everybody in the pod was like, "Damn, this little dude is, he not somebody to mess with." And so I got respect out of that. And so I went back to like, you gotta use violence. So I went back to that 8-year-old kid, like, use violence again, right? And so like from there on, I went back to survival.
So is that so from juvenile hall? How did that prepare you for like the prison culture and the politics behind it? Is it similar to like?
Not even close.
Oh, right. So explain. Let's
Juvie and prison is a whole different beast.
Mm-hmm.
2 different systems. Juvie is like, like, you got a little crew. Don't matter what nationality you're in that crew. You're in that crew. Prison was nothing like that. You had to be with your own kind, and I mean your own kind, like whatever you look like. You look white, you be with white. You look Asian, you stay with Asian. You look black, you be with black. Right? Like, it didn't matter. Who you want to be, you hang out with who you're supposed to be or who you look like. But I realized there's like a thing called car. One of my friends was telling me about that. Like, you in a car, like, Asian is a considered car. Black with black is a considered car. Like, you're all in that one, clique, you could say. A car is another form of a word, clique. And so, but I learned that the politics is way crazier. Like, if I had a white friend or a black friend, like, I can't just go out. We just can't hang out, right? Prison's like, no, you don't do that. No, you can't hang out. There's no such thing hanging out with other races. You got to be with your own. But not only that, it's like, it's safer in Asians and Pacific Islander. The number in the late 90s was like nothing. It's like hardly any of us there. I remember when I went to prison I think it was like 95. In reception, there was a whole bunch of us because we was all going through reception center, which is a processing spot where you get placement to go to the main yard to other institutions. And then when I got shipped off to Tash Tree Max, There's only one other Asian on the yard. There's two of us on the whole yard, which is like, I think like 1,200 of us, 1,200 people on the yard, but there's only two out of 1,200. I'm like, damn, we're really outnumbered. They put me with this Mexican dude. He did all kinds of, like, he stole from me. He set me up for different, try to set me up for, he assaulted me in the sense, not physically, but, physically in the sense, like, I'd be sleeping, he'll put, like, food in my mouth.
Like try to make you choke or something
like
that.
Some kind of stupid stuff, right? Like, very childish stuff, right? And I got to the point where, like, I started making a knife. Like, I'm going to stab the hell out. I'm going to kill this dude today. And I swear it's by the grace of God, that dude got attacked on the yard. Because I was going to kill him that night. I was going to stab him. Because I'm tired of all this BS. You know, I didn't care about the consequences. Like, I'm tired of this. But by grace of God, like, he got taken off the yard. And I got rid of the knife.
Mm-hmm. And then, so then how did you, I guess per se, like, how did you prove yourself? Like, how did you, like, through all of figuring out, you know, how did that?
So prison system is different than juvenile hall, where juvenile hall, you have to physically prove yourself, fight somebody bigger than you or something like that. Prison's like, you don't put yourself out there. Don't try to be a tough guy. The tougher you try to be, they're not going to fight fair. They don't fight fair in prison. In juvenile hall, there's no weapons. It's fist fights. Prison, they make knives. They make razor blades. Like, they make a thing called bone crusher. Like, what the hell? That literally will break bones in your body. Like, they use it to kill people, right? Or, like, maim you for the rest of your life. So they use weapons in prison versus juvenile hall. And so, like, I learned, like, so I went back to what helped me out as a kid was went back to sports. Started playing handball, basketball, volleyball, like any sports. And I made friends. Like, I made peace with a lot of different nationality because that was the only neutral area that all races could do is play sports. And some sports teams are predominantly just one race. And because prison politics, like, you can't play mixed with other race. But one thing I realized about the Asian car and the Pacific Islander car, like, we could roll with anybody. Well, except for the Southern Hispanic or the North Hispanic. Like, we couldn't play with them because they had their own politics. They had more stricter politics than white and blacks. But I understand there's another dynamic when I went to prison. They asked me when I first got there, they say, we know you're not black. We know you're not white. So there's like 4 categories of people. Either you're black, white, Mexican, or you're other. I'm like, I'm Asian. They say, well, okay, so they marked other. So anybody that wasn't white, black, or Mexican was considered other.
So is that from, like, the people from the cars doing that, or is it?
That was an institutional policy.
Okay.
So, yeah, but one of the issues, like, people don't hear about too many Asians going to prison. And there's a reason why, because we're clumped them in this other category. So there's no disaggregated data to prove that there's an issue with the Asian Pacific Islander community with dealing with incarceration. So it just continued that veil of invisibility. Like, even in our cultures, like, whatever dirty laundry you have, whatever issue you have in the house, you put up this image that everything's good. And my mom instilled that into me. Even my auntie, my dad, like, everybody. Like, you save face. You suck it up. You keep that quiet. You don't share it with nobody. You can't even share it with us. We don't want to hear it. And so, like, prison can perpetuate the veil of invisibility. Like, there's no issue. Like, when my family, like, I have cousins that ask, like, where's Key? They will make up all these lies. He went to the military. He went to school. He went abroad to other countries, right? And so when I came home, people were like, damn, you got a PhD, right? You just got out of school. You've been gone like 23 years. Like, you must got a PhD. I'm like, no, I was in prison. Right? Like, it was like some kind of, the way it's like came out, like, I was like shameful, like I was in prison. Right? But yeah, because my family is still like, it's shameful to be in prison. My auntie, before I was released from prison, my auntie's like, when you come home, because I told her, like, there's a good chance I'm coming home, right? This was years before I actually came home. There's a good chance I'm coming home. And she was like, when you come home, you forget everything you've been through, forget everyone you've been to, and you don't say no mention of that you've been incarcerated. I'm like, yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. So it's just like sweeping it under the rug. Or some might say, it's a fresh start, but just to ignore it. But it feels like that hasn't really solved a lot of the things that you've been through, like, sweep it under the rug. Don't say anything. Let's, avoid it or put it over here in the corner. But just to go back, it sounds like the things that really kept you safe, and I use that in quotes, is to do sports, while you were in prison. And in that way, did that like limit, I'm gonna call altercations with potential rivalry?
Yeah.
I hope I said that right.
Yeah, well, it did. For me, it built a lot of, how you say it, like mutual friendships across different nationalities through sports. We got to learn about each other and respect each other, not as a car, but as an individual. Like, I see you, you see me, because we had this mutual bond, which is sports, and so that kept me away. That kept me out of a lot of trouble, but also kept me safe from a lot of trouble. So when more Asians are coming on the yard, and like in 98, a lot of Asians, it was a big development, which I think Hen could talk about, like a flood of Asians that came into the prison system.
Yeah. So I think Key's story isn't uncommon, as you all have been doing a series on it, but the Vietnam War impacted many people, and it caused a wave of refugees. And so I think to contextualize, it's important to understand kind of all the moving parts of history, right? So we see that the Vietnam War is happening, but what we need to understand about the Vietnam War, that it's a civil war, one that is U.S. backed by who props up, a Vietnamese conservative nationalists and to fight communism. And during the Civil War, the Communist Party was going to win. And so the South Vietnam began to prop up itself to fight back. And this is kind of where we see, this this Cold War going on against communism, because of the, fearing that like communism will spread around the world. And then we see that the Vietnam War then spills over Cambodia and Laos. And so how we understand the Vietnam War in context to U.S. history, right, is as Vietnamese refugees, as Southeast Asian refugees broadly are fleeing their countries, because now they are all basically civilians living in war. They are, going into refugee camps in neighboring countries. They are enduring tough conditions. The U.S. in the 60s is going through the civil rights, right? And then in the 70s, we see the prison boom. And we have to acknowledge this because in the 60s, we see civil rights being associated with crime. And so we see that criminalization of civil rights rises, and then it gives rise to things like the war on drugs, the rise to things like the prison boom. And so once we see a mass exodus of Southeast Asian people, particularly Vietnamese folks, coming into places, we see that they're coming to metropolitan cities of the United States, where they're primarily, people of color. They're highly criminalized. There are a lack of resources. So everyone is being put in a pool. And so what you're hearing from Key is like his resettlement process started in San Francisco, which is not uncommon. Many Vietnamese and Southeast Asian people end up in San Francisco, end up in Oakland, where there are a lack of resources, where there is a high rate of surveillance and criminalization. during this time from, the 70s throughout the 90s. And so it creates a huge response to desperation of survival, particularly in Key's wave. We call these people 1.5 generation, which refers to a people who were young people who were refugees, right? And so they were old enough, they may be old enough to remember the war, and they may be old enough to, experience refugee resettlement, but they had spent most of their lives here in the United States. And so there's a huge tension buildup between families, particularly, refugee families, right? And so I think what Key is sharing is, sadly very common in the context to how we understand how, Asian Americans or even Southeast Asians specifically, get led into mass incarceration, into these very specific conditions, right? And we often call that, the school to prison pipeline. But for us at APSC, it's the migration school to prison to pipeline. And hopefully what we want to see at the end of it is freedom and healing.
Woo! Let that sit, people, for a second. Because I think what you bring up is very powerful in the sense of no one thinks about the migration story. Like if you're not exposed or if it's not in your childhood, it's not in your neighborhood. And sometimes we experience stuff like just part of your story is we don't even know we're in the story. We just know it's happening. We just know like, oh, someone came in there. Oh, okay. Well, all right. And we grow up and we're like, oh, that's what was going on. And you contextualize it and like we're a part of history, although people feel like we're not, but we are. We are a part of history. We are a part of how people migrate to this country, how people grow up in this country. And then, and the assumption is like, oh, you migrated here, you're not a citizen. And that's not the story at all. But sometimes growing up in this country, that's what you hear. Oh, they're not. They just came here to freeload or what they went through wasn't that serious. And I was like, well, they fled from another country. I don't think that sounds right to me. And I was a little girl, like listening to that nonsense. That's part of how I got in trouble in middle school, but I digress.
Well, the same thing, like that's what the Native Americans say about the English that came over.
Yeah.
Like, why you come to our country, right? You got your own country. Why you coming over here taking our resources? So I'm like, if you're not really a Native American, you're not really a native of this country.
Right. Yeah. And how that's flipped.
Yeah.
And how the definition of Native American or the definition of American changed, which we're going to not go into that, but we're going to stay focused on the story. But I think it does speak to like how things does change in history to reflect those who are in power, to reflect that they get the most, money, resources, time, energy, and benefit off the people who built the country, right? So I'm gonna circle back. So with that, as you were in prison, and it sounds like you were still exemplifying some of the same behaviors of like avoidance, still keeping the peace, like I'm not trying to have no problem with people, but if I have to handle it, I can handle it. And your parole hearing comes. So share a little bit about like that piece.
So in 2010, I went up to my first initial parole board hearing, which before I actually, like for anyone that has a serious, that has a life sentence, has to go through this process to be deemed suitable and not a threat to public safety. But before we can go to the board of parole hearings, we have to be seen by a therapist to be analyzed of our threat to public safety. So that's, how's your upbringing as a child, right? What have you done before you got locked up? Also, like, what have you done while you was in prison? But one of the factors that a lot of people in society don't know about, especially in California, it's like if you came in as a youth, when you get incarcerated as a youth, like they don't take into consideration, like, I might go to the board as an adult, but I got locked up as a kid. And it was before the change of a law, like Senate Bill 260 and 261, the youth offender law bills, were like, to recognize that take into consider youth factors. So like on my first hearing, there was no SB 260 or 261 in enactment, right? So I went in there physically as an adult. So physically, I was viewed as an adult. And so when I went to my hearing, on my psychological evaluation, I got a moderate. So it's a low, moderate, or high. I got a moderate because I was a youth. So like one of the things that people don't understand too with the prison system, there is a point system. So like if you come in as a youth, you get all these extra points. I wasn't married, that's a point. That's 2 points. So they go by. I wasn't in the military, more points. I never had a house. That's more points. And severity of my crime, that's a bigger chunk of points. So instead of going to like a minimum security prison because of all these points, I went to a maximum security prison.
So the more points you have, the
high level prison you go to. And the high level prison you go to is the more extreme prison. More violence, more lockdowns, so more solitary confinements, like less programming, less freedom outside your cell. Even there's always violence, and some of the lockdowns go for months to years. And I've been through those, and so a lot of young people that go to prison have all this against them.
Yeah, can I add a little bit? So I think the evaluation process to go to the parole board is incredibly comprehensive, and it lends itself to not a holistic view. And so I feel like what Key is describing is that kind of like how we think about the school system. Your school is just as good as your resources, the resources that get put into it. Same thing with prisons, right? If you're not at a prison where there is a high level of programming, or that there's not an availability of programming to you, it makes it incredibly hard to advocate for yourself or make a case for yourself on why you would be able, to be eligible for release. I think that being said, I think it's important to recognize the organizing of incarcerated people to make those spaces for themselves. And what Key is referring to when he refers to SB 260, 261, came straight out a group called KidCat, which was incarcerated men forming a group for juvenile lifers that paved the way to recognize that these are very special factors to have to consider when we're thinking about like the impacts of youth, right? Because when we're thinking about youth justice in the current time, we also have to think about how it impacts people their lived experiences. And so I think, right now we're seeing the governor, want to turn San Quentin into a rehabilitation center at San Quentin. But we have to also acknowledge that the programs that exist in San Quentin could not be that without the organizing of incarcerated people who had the will and the insight to create them for themselves. And Key is a huge part of, being a part of that movement to pass SB 260 and 261.
I'm gonna go back to what you said about the examination. What do you mean by? Well, I think I know what you mean, but I'm gonna ask for clarifying. Like holistic, when you do the psychological evaluation, is because you mentioned that it wasn't holistic.
Yeah, I think that when we are talking about like who is eligible to be released or a risk for public safety, we're often basing it on like really arbitrary things, right? Like if you have access to a cell phone inside, like that can ding you in a psychological evaluations because you were not obedient, right, to a rule inside. But in the real world, like, people are living in isolation and people need connection, right? And that's how we think about like we think about public safety. People need connection to keep each other safe. And so when we're thinking about public safety and the risk factors to that, like, people actually need resources when they come home, right, in their reentry. And I feel like he has a lot more insight on that, what goes into a psych eval more than I do. But I think it's like incredibly important to acknowledge that, like, when you go to the board parole, like, you're going before a board of like people who are, ex-law enforcement, ex-prosecutors, who decide the fate of whether or not you get to be released or be eligible to be released. And those are really important features because they can lend itself to being incredibly biased, right?
Yeah, I hear you. You have anything to add to that?
Oh, wow.
If you don't, it's okay. But I just want to make sure.
I'm gonna.
Okay.
That a whole nother segment.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna, if you feel like it, tag it in somewhere, you can. I'm just gonna tag it in there. So we're at the parole hearing. You go through the psychological evaluation. Describe kind of like the parole hearing. Describe the parole hearing where you were.
So one other thing that dings people like that migrated or resettlement is that because you wasn't born in this country. Like, that goes against you in your psychological evaluation too. And also in front of the commissioners that are there. They're like, oh, you weren't born here, so do you have parole plans to your country? I'm like, my country don't want me back. And they're like, I have no one there. Like, and what I'm going to do back in my country? So, like, that actually went against me my first parole hearing. Like, I didn't have plans for Vietnam because I have no one in Vietnam. I can't even speak the language I can't even speak Vietnamese. Like, well, barely any at all. And no, I'm not gonna have a parole plans over there because where am I gonna go, right? They don't have a transition house over there in Vietnam, so like who I'm gonna reach out? And so they say, well, have you reached out to the consulate? Like, no, I never even thought about it. I didn't know I had an immigration issue until I came to prison because in juvenile hall I didn't know. They didn't tell me none of that stuff. It wasn't until I went to prison they was like, oh, you have an immigration hall. I'm like, for what? Growing up, I thought I was a citizen. Well, I didn't know what citizen meant, but I thought I was from this country, right? They said, no, you committed a serious crime. And so now all your legal, and we came here legally, all your legal status is gone. Like, you have no more status.
So they stripped your status but you were the kid.
They don't.
Oh, they don't.
They don't care, right? Mm-hmm. Because I didn't become, my parents never became citizen. My dad became a citizen when I was 12, but because my dad didn't have custody of me, it doesn't transfer over. My mom didn't become a citizen until I was 25. So because she became a citizen after I was 18, I didn't get that citizenship right either. So now I'm basically illegal, and so the board actually docked me on that, and I was like, well, you're not, so you need to find plans because we're not gonna release you back to this country. Going to release you back to Vietnam, to their custody. So, like, if we to find you suitable, we going to hand you over to immigration, pending deportation. And so, the first board hearing I had was mentally traumatizing and confusing for me because I don't know what to do. And at the time, I was still minimizing my behaviors because I didn't have no programming or self-help classes to help me understand how to take accountability and how to look at, like, how to take off all the Band-Aids, you could say, to deal with all the traumas that helped me explain why I committed my crime. So I went back to what I knew, just blame everybody for my fault. And so they say, well, you're not being accountable. So they deny me 5 years. They say you're not being accountable for your actions. You're not remorseful for what you've done. The victim, the mother, and the parents was actually there at my hearing. The thing about parole board hearing that people don't have the view of. So, like, there's two commissioners that's in front of me, or like in front of all of us. There's the district attorney, and then the victim, either the victim family or victim services are on the right side. And they tell us in the beginning, you focus on us, not on them. Because if we look that way, that actually could be dinged against us for looking that way. Even to the district attorney, like, we cannot look at the district attorney. We had to look at the commissioner. So any question they have, we had to state it to the commissioner in front of it. And then there's two corrections officers behind us to make sure nothing happens. And so, like, just sitting in that, like, it's like a spotlight just beaming on us, like a heat lamp in a hot seat, just like trying to hold ourselves accountable. And I can't hold myself accountable if I don't know all the language. I don't know how to be accountable. So it showed. It showed at my first hearing, and I got denied 5 years. And the victim's family was like, you're that monster that took away our son. And I couldn't say nothing. I couldn't do nothing about that. You're right. I am that person that took away your precious son.
Mm-hmm. And I think what it sounds like is, just listening about your upbringing, I don't see anyone ever taking accountability for their actions. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but owning up to, like how you felt, like, being a parent to your siblings, or owning up to like how your dad made you feel, or I guess the decisions they made that affected you, owning those accountability measures. So with that, you got denied. And so what happened after your parole hearing? So you got denied. You have to wait 5 years. And how's that time?
The next 3 years after my hearing, actually the next 2.5 years after my hearing, I just numbed out. I just went through the motions. Went to work, went to school, played sports, but not really mentally, physically conscious. Just went through the process. Like a walking zombie in a sense. Then I was in a group called VOGUE, Victim Offender Education Group. I became a participant. The program lasted about 2 years, year and a half to 2 years, where we sit through a process. First question they ask us, first homework we have is describe the day of your crime. I remember I wrote like a 1-pager in the beginning, and they looked at it. We talk about it. We meet once a week for 2 hours. There's a circle process where there's like 10 of us with an outside therapist that's inside that volunteered their time to come into the prison to help us heal. No, not too many other prisons has what San Quentin have. I was at San Quentin at this time. Sat there for 2 years. Went through the process. Learned to just face myself. Face it, and then learn to open up that kid. Expose that kid to strangers. People I don't even know. Even people. So one of the dangers about prison is being vulnerable. Like, you don't want to put your vulnerability out there because people will take advantage. There's predators in there. Even in society, there's predators on social media. Like, there's everywhere, right? But prison is more dangerous in a sense, like, you can't run nowhere. You can't go nowhere. And so, like, I had to expose myself. All my hurt, everything about who I was, what I'd done in my life to strangers. It was painful. It was like burning. But what that whole process it affected me, but not to the point where at the end of the program where we had circuit victims come in. People that are victims to crime similar to the one that we all committed in the circle. And they share their story. So it's a restorative healing, it's a restorative justice model that was, for me, was transformational. I'm like, wow, like I'm seeing the people that are affected or impacted by what we done in our life. And so that triggered something in me where like, wow, like something sparked like a opening in my life, in my mind, my consciousness, like I need more of this. I need to learn. I need to heal myself. I not just myself, but I need to help other people heal too. So like we all were still hurting in prison, and then one thing that helped, one thing that opened my eyes, like people in prison are people in prison. They're not a murderer. They're not a drug addict. They're not a drunk driver. They are people that was hurting and made stupid decisions in life. And so, like, even child molesters why did they become, or why did they do what they did? Right? And so, like, understand the psychological impact that had on their childhood, develop who they are, who they became in prison. So I went down this path of self-journeying, self-healing, and people that are facilitators in a lot of these groups, which are other prisoners, I'm like, to come with the courage, like, can you help me look at myself? And that was the hardest thing for me to ever ask anybody. Like, there was a couple people I'm like, can you help me look at myself? Because there's not too many people in prison that you could really trust. And so, like, one became, like, he became my brother. Like, actually, both of them became my brothers. Like, you know, we still in contact to today. And it hurt. I'm telling you, it was painful. Like, they put that mirror up so close. Like, I was so scared. Like, and we cried a lot of crying. So after 4 years, I filed a petition to go back early, 1 year early. I went back. It was like, for me, it was like 9 a day. Also, SB 260 and 260 came out, where it's a youth fairness hearing. So more weight was put on to our youth factor. So when I went to my psychological evaluation and talking with the therapist, it was a whole different understanding. I wasn't just being criminalized for my lack of adulthood, but they actually focused on my youth, and it felt different. It felt like this person really like listened to what I was trying to share, and also helped me understand. Like, so they did a lot of follow-up questions, like, how would you, like, they target where, like, how would you feel at that time? Whereas my first one, they didn't ask you how you felt. They just, like, analyze you, like, tell me about this and then just move on. But now I felt like I was actually being heard and seen and validated. And so I went to my hearing this time. I had a low score versus a moderate. And the victim's family was there. Again, the parents was there. At the end of the hearing, some of these hearings could go up to like 5-7 hours. Mine was like 2.5. And so the victim's parents actually got to speak at the end. Of course, I can't look at them because we're not allowed to. The mom actually, the one that was really hurt, and I don't blame her for being so hurt. She spoke first this time. It was dad that spoke last time. The mom said, Key, from what I hear today, I don't believe that same 17-year-old kid that committed that crime. Right? And she like, I forgive you. I didn't know how to process that because in my culture, we don't talk about forgiveness. So, like, part of me is like, I was asking myself, what does that mean? What does that mean that she forgives me, right? I talk about it all the time in the group, but I never understood it because I wasn't taught that. And so, after they spoke,
Take your time.
The board came back. They said we made a final decision. They said, Mr. Lamb, from my observation today and our discussion, we do not find you a threat to public safety. We find you suitable for parole. And you will wait 6 months for the governor's decision. But for me, it wasn't even about being found suitable. It's like, getting an acknowledgement from the mother that I'm not that same 17-year-old kid that took her son's life.
And then what does that forgiveness mean for you? And take your time to answer.
Even to today, I'm still trying to process that. Like, what does that mean to me? What does forgiveness mean to me? Because I still don't understand it. Like, part of me is like, I don't deserve it, right? Like, sorry. Like, like part of me still don't feel like I deserve that forgiveness. Because I could still visit my mom, where she can't visit her son unless she go to her grave. So, like, I still feel hard to accept that because of what she got to experience every day. Waking up and not being able to touch her son. So it's hard for me to say I accept her forgiveness. But it's something that I'm working on. Working on to accept that because that's why I do the work I do today. Is to make sure another kid don't have to end up in the same situation I did. Another family don't end up losing another son or daughter, right? That's why my family doesn't understand that. I think it's hard for them to understand that because they're still in that old culture of saving face. And that's some of my family, my grandfather died behind that because he never was taught that process. He's never held accountable to that process. So like self-help programs in prison does change life. We need more of it, but we like Hen said, we need an advocate. We need advocates for that, for people to have that opportunity to look in the mirror and to heal, but also to make a difference once they come home.
And to see the change in yourself, because that's the most powerful piece, is the change you see in the mirror. You know, you want to drink some water? You good? I'm just checking in on the heart.
You.
Checking in on the heart, because that's a deep moment right there. I don't want to, So I think also it speaks to the power of change, that people have the power to change, the power and will to be different when exposed to something different. And although you were in an environment that is supposedly, not, nobody's going to change. It's like the fact that you took the opportunity because you wanted to see yourself. And you saw people who were changed in the system that you were in. And I think that's powerful. And so you hear the mom, you hear the dad, you hear the words that you've been, you have 6 months until the governor. And, after the 6 months, what happens? What's next after that?
On my at the last day on the 6 months, I get called back like 2 a.m. Pack up your things. You're being discharged. Didn't go back to sleep. Told my roommate, hey, give this stuff out to people. They come by, let them know that I left. Tell them send my love and I give them a hug, but I can't. They opened my door, escorted me to it's called R2R, receiving and releasing. They said, well, you're not going home. You're going to be detained by immigration. They're coming to pick you up, get all your stuff, get ready for when they come. No phone calls, can't call my family. Certain things, a lot of stuff I couldn't take with me. I had to mail it home. Had a little box, like a little shoe box of stuff. They came pick me up. I don't remember what time it was. It was during the morning. Shackled me up. Got in a van. They drove to San Francisco immigration processing unit. I I was asking so they allowed me to make a phone call my family, let them know what's going on. Especially my mom, called my mom, told her, like, but she, at this time, like, my Chinese really was bad. And my Vietnamese was like nothing. And so, like, just trying to, in broken Chinese, telling them what happened. But really, I called my brother, explained the whole thing to him. I said, hey, let mom and the family know, like, this is what's going on. I'm going to be transferred to immigration custody pending deportation. They had millions of questions like, why you did your time, why they trying to deport you. I can't get into that right now, but once I get to when I have the ability to call and write, I will give y'all more details. From there, I went on a 3-day bus trip, shackled. One of those days, I was shackled for me and people that was with me, shackled for 14 hours straight in a ice box they put us in. So one thing I realized my time in prison, like, they had a little bit of humanity towards us. But when I was going through the deportation process, like, they viewed us as aliens, like on a green card. You're an alien. You're not a resident here. We don't want you here. You have nothing coming. The facilities was so inhumane. It's like people think third world country is bad. Like, immigration custody, it was no better. It was nasty. I remember when I finally settled in, didn't get a shower for 3 days. When I asked for a shower, I was threatened with physical assault if I was to ask for a shower. They said, we'll give you a shower when we're ready. And so I'm just like, okay. And me and my roommate was he's from Jamaica. So, like, they threatened both of us. It's like, either one of you guys ask him, you guys gonna have problems. Finally got showers after 3 days. And just waited and went to court and signed the paperwork. Like, in order for you to get out, you sign this paperwork saying you're accepting deportation. Because at that time, like, people that came from Vietnam that came to U.S. before 1995, there was a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding between the U.S. and Vietnam. Anybody that came in before 1995 was not deportable or not accepted back to Vietnam. And Hen could talk a little more about that.
Yeah. Yes, I think Key summed it up perfectly. But I believe back in 2008, a MOU was signed between Vietnam and the U.S. So for the U.S. to be able to deport someone, the receiving country has to agree to it. And so a lot of the times, deporting people with convictions is actually it depends on what the political relationship you have with that country is. And so specifically in 1995, it's because that's when the U.S. and Vietnam had normalized relationships. And so but what we're seeing now is that may not be the case anymore under Trump era policies that, like, have continued under Biden, under the Biden administration. So what we're seeing now is that the 1995 rule doesn't apply. So ultimately, most people who, like, fall under Key situation, regardless of whether or not you arrived before or after 1995, are all subject to deportation depending on what their circumstances are.
It sounds so confusing.
So basically, in a nutshell, at any time I could be picked up.
So it's like, well, I guess let me explain the confusion. Maybe So you come here, you did the crime, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's been stripped, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, we have an MOU and we can just deport you at any time. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, what's the point of the asylum if they can still deport you at any time?
Yeah,
no, that's sorry.
Yeah, immigration is incredibly complex. When you get into ICE, you're not entitled to an attorney. You ultimately, like, once you get transferred from a prison to ICE, your due process is severely limited versus, like, if you were just released back into the community, right? Like, you have an opportunity to build community. You have an opportunity to fight against your immigration case, because regardless or not of whether or not you get transferred to ICE, I think what the important feature of APSC's work is that we primarily work with impacted people who have ICE holds, which basically just means that we have a huge population of membership that is currently incarcerated that has a certain immigration status. Right now, what CDCR does, which is the California Department of Rehabilitation, they voluntarily turn people over after they have been eligible for release. So CDCR does not have to do this, but they do so willingly. And it's a huge issue because it's the primary factor to why ICE detention centers are being filled up, right? They're being funneled directly from prisons, despite the fact that people have transformed, despite the fact that people have gone through this very comprehensive parole board, despite the fact that the governor has already approved it. Despite all of these facts, California will turn people over after they've been eligible for release into ICE. And then from there, their due process is severely limited. And depending on what part of the country you're from, ICE will try to deport you to many different places. So in the example of Key, ICE has not been able to get travel documents from Vietnam for Key yet. But we have many members where it's ethnically you are Cambodian, but they will try to get and when Cambodia says no, we will not accept, because Cambodia doesn't have the greatest relationship, or even Laos, Laos doesn't have the greatest relationship with the U.S. right now. They won't accept them. They'll try to deport you somewhere else, like Thailand, or they'll try to deport you to the Philippines, where you're not actually ethnically from. So I think this is all to say that ICE is very rogue. And I think also something important to contextualize is that I don't know if Anoop shared this already, but ICE was created very recently, shortly after 9/11. The sole purpose of ICE is to really surveil and further detain and incarcerate and criminalize immigrants, right? And so when I actually started volunteering at San Quentin, a lot of the incarcerated guys refer to ICE as INS, which is the Immigration and Naturalization Services, which is, I get their understanding of the old ICE, which was everything built into one. But after 9/11, INS broke up and split into different agencies that function as different surveillance programs.
I'm just going to shake my head, and that's a lot. And then also it just, I would feel I'm on eggshells all the time. Mm-hmm. You do, just on eggshells all the time. I don't know if you feel that way. I'm projecting, but I would feel like I'm on eggshells. But I'm going to circle back. So with all that information, you have to sign this paper that, hey, you want to get out of here? You're going to have to face deportation. Yeah. And you sign the paper, and what's next for you? What happens next?
Either the government, even the U.S. government let me out, or deport me.
Mm-hmm. So you sign it and you still have to wait.
I still have to wait. So I waited, I think 4 more months afterward, because I was in there for 5 months. So the first month I went through the whole court process, and I just did the waiting game. Mm-hmm. And then, so on April 20th, 2016, the detention officer called me out of the pod in my cell at night and say, you're going to be released tomorrow. And so, and she was cold-hearted. She was like, well, we could release you today because technically you was released last week, but we're gonna release you tomorrow.
That's so petty.
And she was like, said it with like no feelings, like it didn't mean nothing.
It just sounds like that, when you say inhumane, that's how they're treating you, like inhumanely. So they release you. Did they release you that night or?
The next morning.
Okay.
The next morning, they released me from Orange County. What was it? I can't remember where I got released from now. But I got released down south. They just so they say, well, you have a phone call. You could call whoever you want. You could either, and I tried to call my brother, couldn't reach him. They said, well, you have two choices. You could go back and wait, or let me out. Like, I don't care, just let me out. I'll wait outside to the next day, I don't care. All right, just let me out. So they let me out. I had 2 bags of my property in a clear plastic bag. One of them had all my paperwork in it, my court documents and everything. They poured lotion all over it. They opened up a bottle of lotion and poured it all in there. So I'm just like, all my documents are ruined. And then the other one was some of the clothing I had. And I just stood outside and looked around, and there was an African-American gentleman came up to me. He said, you lost? I said, obviously, very. So I'm like, can you point me to the nearest payphone booth? He's like, what? Payphone? We don't, he pointed me to a direction to where a possible one could be, which is like half a block away. I walked over there, looked at the thing. I'm like, ain't no way I'm making a phone call with this. It was disgusting. It was nasty. It stunk. But then the more I looked at it, the cord was cut anyway. And in addition to that, I didn't have no coins. So couldn't make a phone call if I wanted to. So I went to store. I remember before I got locked up, one of the things I used to always have every day was a Snapple strawberry kiwi. So I bought me a Snapple strawberry kiwi and this humongous organic banana that was huge. I'm like, but I went across the street. I went to the bus station across the street from the county jail and just sat there and got dizzy looking at cars going by. I'm like, how in the heck am I going to call my brother and let him know where I'm at? Because he flew from Florida the night before because they finally told him. They knew this was going to happen, but they decided, we're not going to tell him till the day of. So they called my brother. He had to emergency book the flight and the hotel to come pick me up because he was the only one that could pick me up because everybody, my mom was over there in Florida. My grandma can't pick me up. All my uncles and cousins, everybody was working. So and he's like, I want to be the one to pick you up. This is the one that I raised when I was a kid. So he's like, so there was these 3 Latino women, and I approached them really nicely, gentle, with a hand, waving, say, can I use your phone? And they looked at me and looked at each other and spoke Spanish. I couldn't understand what they're saying, but from the looks, they didn't want to do it. And they're I said, I'll pay you. I'll pull out some money. I'll pay you. And they're so it seemed like an attorney for them to give me an answer. And then they're okay. And then the bus comes. And they say, sorry, and got on the bus. So I sat back down. Don't know how long it was. I had no time. Then some more people came to the bus stop. And there was this Latino dude, young guy. I was hey, can I make a phone call? I pointed across the street. I just got out of jail. He's sure. He handed me the phone. And I looked at him. I looked at the phone I don't know how to use this.
Oh, yeah, because you've been, yeah.
I didn't have a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm I said, I don't know how to use this. He said, what? So he opens it, he opens it up. And I'm so it's just a front screen. I'm how you make a call? So he showed me, he said, what's the number? So I gave him my brother's number. I called, no one answered. So he's oh, I was thank you, appreciate you. I said, here's some money. He said, no, I'm good. Sat back down. It seemed like eternity again. And then I said, I'm sorry to bother you. Can I try it again? Right? So I got a hold of my brother. He's where you at? So I'm like, here. So they told him I was in I was gonna get out in another location, and instead they sent me out somewhere else. And he's like, I'm not in the same city as you. So he had to come. So I actually got released in Orange County, and they told me he was gonna be released in L.A. So he had to drive from L.A. to Orange County, and I said I'll be at this bus stop in front of in the county jail. I'll just be right here. And then he pulls up. It was like, it was like I didn't know how to feel. I was like hella happy and grateful, but at the same time, like that was frustrating, right? I was like so messed up for them to do that to my brother, and I'm just like, imagine how other people that go through the same situation.
Yeah, it's time consuming and taxing and very petty. That's so petty. So your brother picks you up. Where are you guys driving to? How's that feeling going back?
So from Orange County, I said I want to go visit my grandma, right? And so my advocate at the time, she's like, I'm like, can I go stay at my grandma? Because I was about to go to her transition house. She said, well, let me call your PO, find out. And so I talked to my PO. She was super cool, African-American PO. She said, yeah, you can spend the night at your grandma's house, but next day you have to be at your transition house. I'm like, awesome. And I just remember my brother said, here's a phone. It was an iPhone 6. He gave me the phone. I'm like, I don't know how to use this. Call him. He said, FaceTime mom. I'm like, what's FaceTime? He said, FaceTime mom. So I'm just like, you're going to have to show me how to do this. I don't know how to do it. So your sister got you this phone. Like, man, that's awesome. So called my sister, thanked her so much for it. FaceTime my mom. She was bawling like crazy. I was like, this is surreal. Like, damn, this is happening. Like, and so just the whole ride to Sacramento was like, I don't know, like 6 hours. And I just looked out the window. No bars in front of me, no screens. I get to I was just shocked, like, it's real. I remember when we got to my grandma's house, the bed hurt so much because it was too soft. In prison, we had a sheet, either concrete or a metal sheet. And so, like, I got used to that. And then, so sleep on a soft bed, like, I slept on the floor. So I'm like, I can't sleep on that. My back hurt. But for the whole week, I only slept 72 hours for the whole week because I was afraid that I'll wake up and be in prison. Because before I got out, I used to have a lot of dreams where I woke up, I was free, and then when I really woke up, I was in prison. So I thought this was just a dream when I wake up. So like I was scared to go to sleep because I'm like, I don't want this to be a dream.
Mm-hmm. They're like it being snatched from you and stuff. And so, how was spending time at grandma's?
It was different than my childhood growing up at the house because my grandfather passed away, so he wasn't there. The house was really cluttered. So I'm like, Grandma, why aren't you your house? Like, it's so much stuff here. Like, she said, that's all your aunties and uncles, my dad, they use her house as storage. I'm like, that's so messed up. Mm-hmm. And she don't want to and then she still held on to a lot of my grandfather's stuff, which was like, he was a Chinese medicine doctor. So she had all this old stuff. And I'm like, Grandma, this is not good to have all this. It's no good no more. Let it go. She won't let it go. But it was like, I was trying to help my grandma let go of stuff too. Like I let go of stuff. But it took years with the help of her youngest daughter. I was able to help throw a lot of stuff away. So it's like part of her was able to heal a little bit.
Mm-hmm. It takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes time. And then since being back, what have you been doing since you've been home? Since I've been home, I've been working for Asian Prison Support Committee as doing reentry work, helping people that are
coming home or trying to get out to find the resources that they need, but also just to help family reunified, reconnect with the community. Another big passion thing when I first got home is like transportation was huge. Like the cost of living out here was crazy expensive. I thought prison was expensive. Then I realized like there's a lot of bills to pay out here. And I looked in the mirror, I was like, man, a lot of gray hair started to pop out. And so, but a friend of mine gave me a bicycle. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Another friend gave me a BART card. So I'm like, with the combination of both, like I was able to be free. And so I got into building bikes. So since I've been home.
From scratch?
Taking multiple bikes and put them together and build a bike.
Oh, that is cool.
So since I've been home, I gave away almost 700 bicycles.
Nice.
To formerly incarcerated people, kids, teenagers, college students, homeless folks, veterans, all kind. Whoever needed a bike had a bike. If I had it, they have it too.
That is nice. What about share a little bit about the Roots program?
Oh, the Roots program is the first of its kind in the country. It's a first of a kind in the sense where it's focused on Asian Pacific Islander history, cultures, and values. One of my mentor, Eddie Zhang, he said that he came in. He was incarcerated, but now he's a philanthropist. He started his own nonprofit where he give out donations to small organizations to help them on their feet. So he talked about this thing called Chi, like the energy that we have, and he said, I want you guys to think about as an acronym: culture, history, and identity. Learn about your culture, learn about your history, and it defines who you as a person. And so Roots was not just focused on itself. It's about focus on healing, like that holistic part that Ian was talking about earlier. Like it's for us to know about our history and culture. Like growing up, my family was very prejudiced against other Asians. They don't know why, but they just very prejudiced against other Asian, also against the African American community. I think it's all by, colonization that it played an influence in it, and white supremacy that played influence in that. But the more we got to learn about our Chi, it's like we realized that we have so much in common. We go through so much the same struggles, and it was able to do a lot of cross healing. But one of the biggest things that I learned from the first part of Roots was that we learned about gender identity. Because prison is a very hyper masculinity place. So like learning to talk about gender identity was we talked about it for like 2 weeks after the class. Like no one in the shower. Our shower are like out here. It's like similar to like a barbershop. So like a whole bunch of men in the shower talking about gender identity. So that was funny. But it's so huge.